Hi everyone, welcome to my lecture about middle games. So today I'm going to show two of my French games, and I'm going to talk about the French middle game. So French is one of my all-time favorite openings. I've been playing it my whole life. So I have some nice wins, some really bad losses too. So I'm going to focus on the Winawer, which is this variation. Does anyone play the French with black? Nice. Does anyone face the French? An e4 player, right? So against the French, what do you play? I used to play the advanced too. Now I play knight d2, and actually I have trouble facing knight d2, but I also have trouble playing knight d2. So there's something about this knight d2 move that really bothers me. But e5, French players do love to face e5, but I think the really good players who play e5, they do really well with it. Like Grishchuk, when he plays the advanced French, like his games are amazing. But again, overall, if you're playing a French player, you go e5, usually they're just very happy. Yeah, so white has several ways of facing the French. So the reason I'm focusing on the opening, because like we need to know something about the opening to play the middle game. So something has to be done about this e4 pawn. So either push it, you take it, or you defend it. So there's a big difference between knight d2 and knight c3. What is the difference? You're defending the pawn. So if your opponent takes, there is no difference because you take back. But for black, how do the options change? Yeah. I'll ask both of you. So you choose who goes first. Right. So when you play knight d2, in some ways this is very nice because, again, black has to make some kind of a move. Let's say knight f6. So you can defend your pawn chain. So knight d2 is a little bit more flexible. The problem is, in the long term, this knight on d2 is kind of bad. So you constantly have to find ways to fix it. So knight c3 doesn't have this issue. But the problem is, after a move like knight f6 again, now I'm going to play c5 and I'm going to challenge your center. So you don't have the option of playing c3, but your bishop is open. And not to say one is better than the other, it's a matter of taste, but like these are the differences. So I play bishop b4, so e5, knight e7, take, c5. So I mean, this is one of my favorite positions to play, and so let's see what's going on in this position. Do you play bishop b4 or you play knight f4? I mean, sorry, knight f6 against knight c3?
I play bishop b4 every time.
So you play the Winawer?
Yeah.
So you play this position?
Yeah.
So what can you tell me about this position? Yeah, so this structure is a chronic weakness for white, because even if I exchange, okay, let's say you take out your knight, even if I exchange, now you have this weakness. So the structure is always going to be weak for white. So generally endgames are pretty good for black because I can play with this structure. So what is the problem for black? Yeah, so the dark square bishop is missing. So if white can somehow create weaknesses, let's say if you play g6, I mean that just looks terrible because this bishop is just going to come in. So there are 4 moves for white. So a4, knight f3, h4, and g4. So we can go one by one. So queen g4 is the most combative move. Wait. Oh, that's fine. Because right away you're putting pressure, you're attacking, and your opponent has to make a decision. Either I'm going to castle or I'm going to play queen c7 and give up this pawn. And right away you're trying to take advantage of the fact that you have this bishop. And if we look at the pawn structure, this bishop is not that great. So white has to create squares for this, because if we look at this pawn structure, this bishop is stuck. So if we take out all the minor pieces and we're left with knight versus a bishop, then we're going to have a classical good knight versus a bad bishop. Let's say my knight ends up on c4 and you have this bishop and all the minors are gone. So a4, the bishop comes out on a3. That's the whole idea. So this is so queen g4 is an active move, a4 is an active move, h4. So this looks a little unusual because so far white is just playing with pawns. So the idea of h4 is again the same. So I'm pushing h5, h6. So you have to react to it. This is actually going to be my second game. So I'll talk about it more when I show that game. And knight f3, which I think is the least ambitious move. White is just developing, castling, which of course gives black time to do something. So knight f3, which was played, bishop d7. Bishop. So there are a lot of moves black can try to castle queenside. Just knight c6, queen a5, going after these pawns. So b6. So usually I don't believe in this b6 move because it's just a little bit too slow. But white is not really putting black under pressure, so now there's time. Simply just want to trade the bishops. As it was pointed out, this bishop is just horrible, and this bishop becomes horrible starting from the first two moves is 65, so it gets stuck. So against a move like, if your opponent, for example, goes h4 and you go b6, h5, and you're under pressure, like you don't really have time. You need to play queen a5, knight c6, and put your opponent's center under pressure. But since your opponent is playing something knight f3, you have time. So b6, so check. So the point of this check is what? Right, so you can either play bishop e2, bishop a6, or you can throw in this check. You're provoking bishop d7, and then there's no trade. So bishop d3 and bishop a4. So this is very typical to put a piece on a4. First of all, we're putting pressure on this pawn. Second of all, we are stopping this bishop from getting out. And as I pointed out, white really needs to create squares for this bishop, which is why queen g4 is played, h4 is played. Otherwise, this bishop just gets stuck. So a4, bishop a3 is, of course, a great diagonal. Another thing that I have to mention, playing c4 is kind of a concession because black really wants to keep the pressure in the center and be able to either take on d4 or just keep d4 under pressure. So white is usually happy to see this because black's counterplay is on the queen side and white's play is on the king side. So when black closes the center with a move like c4, that means black doesn't have any active play. So white can just start playing on the king side slowly. But here we're doing it for a very specific reason, because we're stopping this bishop and we're creating this weakness. So this is a very unusual setup. So normally knight goes on c6, queen gets out, maybe castle, but here we played a little different. h6. Of course, we're not going to let the pawn get there. Now, king d7. So what's the idea of this move? The dark squares so far are safe. So I'm going to go to the queen side. So for white to do something, it's a little riskier, right? To play like g4, g5. Okay, you're going to open up your bishop, but your king is here. And this dark squares, nothing is really happening on the dark squares. So what's a target in white's position? Well, c3 not really a target because we can defend it. And we're not really even attacking it.
You're asking white's target.
What?
You're asking white's target.
Yeah, what's a target that black can attack? So king d7. So because queen on, if I put a queen on d7, it's not really doing much. And because of the pawn structure and the close nature of the position, black is not really going to get mated because there's no way to get in. Minor pieces are blocked, the rook cannot really get in, so we're not scared of playing a move like king d7. So what's the reason of putting the knight on c7 instead of c6? Mm-hmm. Right, so if you go knight b5, you're attacking this pawn. Also in the future, if your opponent goes f4, f5, this pawn is defended. So the knight on c6, usually when black puts a knight on c6, the pawn is on c5. So there's a pawn here, so the knight is attacking, wants to go to a5, c4, but here it doesn't make sense. So king d7, queen goes here, defense. So the position is very close, so if white doesn't do anything, it's very hard to break through. So here I started to get a little adventurous. I think I just really wanted to win this game. So I went f5, which is a little double-edged. So I'm trying to open up the position a little bit to create squares for my pieces because like bishop on a4 is great, knight on b5 is great, but then the question is what's next, and it's hard to improve them. And everything is defended, so if white just doesn't do anything, just shuffles around, it's hard to make progress. But what's the downside of playing a move like this? Right, so my king, so basically I'm playing where my king is, right? My king is in the center, I'm opening up the center. What else?
Can't challenge e5.
Can challenge what?
e5.
Oh, with f6, yeah. Well, the reason, I mean, I could have just played f6 as well, but my idea is to play g5, and my opponent probably should take this pawn. Because if you don't, you make some like any move, then I'm gonna push g5, and all of a sudden these pieces are getting in. This knight's maybe not so great, and then maybe f4, and my king is still safe. So what does my opponent have that I don't? I know it's a very broad question. What's the piece that I gave up in the beginning? Dark square bishop. So he has a pair of bishops. So if we open up the position, who isn't going to favor? White. So black has to be very careful. So takes, knight g4. So queen g7. So some things have changed. So what's going on in the position now? So this g4 knight is actually very annoying. Why? Exactly, so that's the annoying part. If I play f5, this knight is going to come to e5, and dark squares knight on e5 is just horrible. Another thing is now, all of a sudden, things like this can start to happen, and I have to worry about my dark squares. So, you know, very dynamic position. So here, so where does black want his pieces? So for white, I think it's obvious. Bishop will go on f4, rook will come to the center, the queen is going to go like here and here, because now white also has squares for his pieces. So what is black gonna do? So now we have some space for our pieces. We can actually move them. So where would you? So bishop probably should stay there. So now we need to do something with our knights. And then, like, what's your plan? Where do you want your pieces? If I give you a few moves, how would you rearrange them? So knight e5 is what I played. So my idea is knight on f5 defends this pawn. So my queen is free to move around. And this knight is going to go where? d6 and e4. It's a perfect square for a knight. If white takes, then I'm very happy, because e3, this bishop is going to become a monster. So knight f5. Actually, the computer likes knight d6 here. We're looking at this position with Yasser, and he liked knight d6 too, but I think knight f5 is fine. So queen b4. So we have two options. Either the bishop goes back or defend the bishop. So this is possible, but looks a little bit scary with the queen coming in. Maybe rook comes, or some kind of sacrifice. And also this is a very big commitment, because now my bishop is stuck. So unless I can somehow play a5 before this bishop, I understand it's a great bishop, it's attacking, it's keeping this rook out of the game, but it's committed to being on a4, and I don't know if I want my bishop there. So bishop c6. So when the bishop moves now, what option does white have? All right, a4, a5, and try to harass me on the queen side. So bishop goes there first. So knight f7. So I want my knight on g5, attacking this bishop. So rook d1 is against e5. So e5, it's a little bit of a scary move, but if I can get in e5 without my position collapsing, then, you know, I'm making progress. So here, knight here, so a4. So again, it looks like black has made a lot of progress, but unfortunately it's still very hard to continue, because this knight on g4 is still very annoying. So here I realized my attack is not really going anywhere, so I thought time to switch to an endgame. Because if we exchange the pieces, this c3 pawn is under attack. Maybe I can push like a6, b5. So I played here, rook a3. Of course, I have a threat. I want to take and play knight c3. So rook g8. So so of course, we're not going to take. So does everyone know why white is playing here? Yeah, because again, dark squares. If you don't do this, I can just take, play a6, and completely block the position. So the point of a6 is, so b5 is a target. Now my bishop is stuck defending it. And then in the future, you want to play queen a5 and again play on the dark squares. So rook g7, queen a5. So now there's a threat. So my opponent makes a blunder. So what to do?
Takes b5.
Well, I mean, that's the threat. Because if rook takes b5, because what is the main defender of my position? This bishop, right?
Yeah.
So if this bishop is gone, it's not clear what's going to happen to this king. So when I'm saying blunder, like you don't have like check, checkmate. But what's changed in the position? I mean, a lot has changed in the position compared to, let's say, we're on move 32. Let's say if we take this position, or even like this position, and then we go all the way here. So a lot has changed. So what are some of the changes in the position? Remember, it's very important to keep up with the changes. So it's important to learn how to understand changes, how to summarize positions. So the black king has moved, right? How is that significant? The king was in the center, now it's on c8. I mean, to me it looks like it's closer to everything actually, because now all the pieces are here. But okay, but let's compare. A lot has happened. So in this position, if we're looking back, when my bishop was on a4 and everything was blocked, so my pieces are where? So my pieces are in the center and the king side mainly. White has moved all his pieces to the queen side. So all this, look, we made all these moves, we maneuvered, we improved our pieces, but now so much has changed. So white has moved all his major pieces to the queen side. So rook b5 has all these attacking ideas. He has a good grip on the dark squares. Queen is on the dark squares. Bishop is on this good diagonal. But what has happened on the king side? But still the minor pieces are here. But I was talking about this knight on g4. So what has happened that knight g4 is a target now? Was my queen on g7 ever attacking the knight? No. But now there's a rook on g7. So what can we do? Right. So now this knight can actually become a target. Because now we can play rook g8 and we have this g file, we're attacking the knight. So that's why all these pieces have moved, right? The queen came here, the rook came here, we're trying to double. But if you're going to play the rook on g8, you have to calculate some lines. Because your pawn's hanging. And also you have to consider how big of a threat is rook b5. So if you think it's a big threat, then maybe you need to stop it. So I played this. So my opponent thought for a while he didn't take. Got scared. Hold on. Why is it like this? Okay. So I think, so this game was several years ago. I think I was calculating knight eg3. But black has a lot of options here. So now everything is forced. So now we can just calculate forced lines. So we can use what we learned about how calculating forced lines to calculate this out. So we also have to keep in mind that knight g8 tempo move. So we have to do something very forcing. So we have to do something about this bishop. e5, I think knight f5, you're just going to hang everything.
Well,
Yeah.
You're saying knight takes h6.
Bishop takes. Really want to give away your rook. So here we can take advantage of the fact that this knight h6 is always a target, so we can just take on g3 right away. And also when we take on g3, we're setting up this discovery attack. So when they take on g8, so I calculated during the game, I think during the game this is what I calculated. Oh wait, so knight g8, something crazy. But my main point was if my opponent takes, I can just take. And still e5 is in the air, rook g3 is coming. But actually knight fg3 is more accurate, because if here, what move do I have? Knight takes e2. So looking at this position and like building up your intuition of attack, so why does something like this work here? Right, because right, I have everything going for you. I have a knight on e4, bishop is on the diagonal, so all of my pieces are on the king side. So if I don't have something now when all my pieces are on the king side and a lot of the white's pieces are on the queen side, like when am I going to have a chance to do something? And of course, rook g8 is a tempo move, and as I mentioned, when did this knight come to g4? No, score sheet. What move? So move 20. So for 12 moves, we're struggling against this knight. So now we finally have a chance to get rid of this knight. So we really want to look into it. So here, let's say knight h6. So take. So what's the next move? So check. So king has to attack. So we have to take. So we lost an exchange. Right, e5. And this king here, not going to survive for very long. So I have this great knight on e4 that cannot be kicked out. If the bishop moves, I can simply play something like queen d7 and attack you on the light squares, or something like queen h7, attack this pawn, target this pawn. So we're down in exchange, but black's position is completely crushing. So what happened in the game was very unfortunate. So my opponent played f3. So again, I can take on g3. And then he took. And here I started seeing ghosts. So what to do with black? Bless you. Yeah, so here I don't know if I missed this perpetual or if I was scared after queen a3, but here I can just simply take. Because after take here, where can the king go? King where? Well, king e7 and knight g8 is a check. King c6, and amazingly, just no checks on the board. So if you take, I can start taking everything. King runs, and still no checks. Well, you can check, but I can block, and you don't have checks, or I can run away. So yeah, again, I'm not sure if I missed this or if I didn't see the perpetual and I thought I'm winning anyways. So I took here, and then the game ended in a draw. So looking back at this position, so some significant moments, just to sum up. So this is opening knowledge, so I knew this was a line, but you know, close position, so we don't have to worry so much about the king being in the center. And here we save time because the queen on d7, as I mentioned, is useless, so we have this nice maneuver. So as I mentioned, this f5 move is a very double-edged move because things can easily go wrong and then my king is stuck. So because it's a middle game, it's a close position in the middle game, we're maneuvering the knights. Because in the close position, you cannot really maneuver your bishops, they're not really doing anything. So this knight on g4, as I mentioned, very annoying piece. The main dynamic is if f5, the knight will come to e5, so I cannot kick out this knight. So my whole game is playing against this and around it, maneuvering my knight to good squares like e4 and f5. So after we maneuver everything around, so this is another important moment. So our bishop was good here, it did its job, it attacked, and it's a little too scary to commit the bishop to a4 permanently, so it's okay to move the bishop back. Because this attack with a4, a5 can be met with b5, and now these knights are very good at securing the king. So after all these maneuvers, like we reached this position, and now that white has really committed these major pieces to the queen side going here, now we have the opportunity to do something. So once we put our pieces on all their ideal squares, now it's a good time to look for something tactical and something to do. Okay, so next game I wanted to show, and I really like playing the structures. I have so many games, and And sometimes it's very easy to lose, because if you don't find counterplay, white's position can be very nice. Okay. So a4 is 6. So h4. So why can white get away with a move like h4? So we're move 7 and white has no development.
Well, the center's closed, so
Mm-hmm. So the center is closed, and what else? But another major thing is the question of this king, because if you're pushing h4, h5, h6, it's very scary to castle. So it's really asking this king where it's going to go. And yes, the center is closed. Even if we take on d4, the center is still going to be closed, because like something, oops. Even if you do something like this, okay, maybe I don't want to trade queens. Maybe like queen g4 here. You know, it's you cannot really do anything against my king. And black also, it's not like black is so ahead in development that we have to worry about it. So h4 I think is a very combative move. This h5, h6 idea is very scary and like a real threat. You cannot just ignore and let the pawn run there and then you know, kind of let this bishop get in, then you're going to be in trouble, which is kind of what I did in this game. So knight c6, so queen a5. So black has to look for this active counterplay, and queen a4. So we've seen this idea before, putting the queen here, trying to blockade on the light square so this bishop doesn't get too active. And here we have a specific idea because we're putting pressure on this d4 pawn. Of course, if white ever does something like this, then we're more than happy. So h6, take. So again, a very double-edged position. And so what's going on in this position? Well, yes. So there are a lot of, this is a very dynamic position. So the last position, more maneuvering, more you know, improvement. Here, this is very dynamic. So in this kind of position, it's very important to, you know, you want to be more precise and you want to play active. Because in a dynamic position, if you're a little passive, you're just gonna fall behind. Okay, so what's important in this position? What's going on? Whoever plays French, this should remind you of the poison pawn. So the poison pawn, it's this line. Oops. So usually, so you have to do something about this pawn. Cannot go g6, that's suicide. So you can either castle or play queen c7. Again, very dynamic position. You lost the pawn, and I mean, okay, a little different because where am I? Let me go back so I can. A little different because h-file is open. I'm not down a pawn, but again, the dynamics are kind of similar. So okay. So what's going on in this position? There's a reason why white wasted 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to do it. So you wasted 4 moves. So you've committed 4 moves to open up your bishop. So it's very important for white to activate this bishop. So a move like bishop g5 is something to be looked at. So again, very dynamic position. If you play a little slowly, then I can take on c3, put a bishop on d7. I can castle queenside even. And then the question is going to be, where's this king going? Because if you let blacks solidify the position, then your own king can be a little, you know, in danger. Because if I take on g7 and you castle kingside, then you know, it's like an invitation to attack. So we spend all these moves to do something on a dark square. So it makes sense for white to continue doing it. So the way my opponent played, I think she kind of lost track of what she was doing and didn't really have a good grasp on the position. And it's very difficult because, you know, it's a very strange position. So again, it's a dynamic position, so activity is very important. So white played something like knight f3 and bishop d3, which is okay, developing moves, but not dynamic enough. So the move that we want to look at is bishop g5. Simply because if you take, now I have this monster bishop on f6. So I don't care about these pawns as much because, well, first of all, your rook is under attack, but now my e5 pawn is protected. So this h7 pawn is always going to be a target. If you move your rook, I'm going to take it. And even if you take on c3, like, I don't care as much, because the whole point is when white has this pawn structure, when you have a pawn chain, what happens when you lose like the root of the chain, like all the pawns fall. So here, if you lose this d4 pawn, you still get to keep your e5 pawn, which is the major pawn. So this bishop is going to be very annoying. So it's going to be very hard for black to deal with. For black to deal with that bishop. So unlike the other position, now position is more open. So now the bishops can move, and you really want to look for activity and this keeping the dynamic, rather than, you know, slowly I'm going to move my, like, maneuver my knight from b5, like the maneuver I did in my last game, like this knight maneuver. So there's no time for this, because everything is hanging, everything's under attack. So there's a lot of tension. So here my opponent just played knight f3. I played bishop d7. Again, she had the chance to play here. So I have to take this, so I cannot allow something like this. So this is game over. Then rook's gonna take, or bishop's gonna come and take, and I just have no moves. So I have to do something like take. Wait. Bishop d7. And now this, and the problem is now this is gonna hang. Now the knight can come in. So a lot of problems for black to deal with. So the queen on a4, in a way, it's a good piece, because with stopped a4, we're putting pressure on a lot of pawns, but at the same time, it's a little out of the game. So in a more close position, the queen on a4 is great. So for example, if I play c4, or this pawn doesn't come all the way to h6, I'm putting pressure here, here, so the queen is great. But when the position becomes more dynamic, and there's a lot of things are hanging, the queen being out of the game can be very problematic. So I played bishop d7. So it's very strange, I have to say. So like, so many things are under attack, and both sides are just developing, like there's nothing going on in the position. So there. So again, bishop g5, as I mentioned. So she played bishop d3, take. Okay. So now some things have changed. So what happened? A lot of changes in the position, right? Yeah. Oops. Yeah, now the dark square bishop is on the wrong diagonal. So we don't want the dark square bishop here, we don't want the dark square on this diagonal. So the dark square has moved away, the dark square bishop has moved away. What else? What? Right, yeah. So the king's on f1, and we have the g file open. Again, before we start looking for moves, we need to figure out what's going on in the position. The problem with queen g4 is after I go g3, I'm threatening to trap your queen. This traps the queen, right? Unless I'm hallucinating. Okay. It's a possibility, but again, no, I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it's not. But before we start looking for moves, let's keep figuring out what's going on in the position, both long term and short term. E5 pawn is a little bit weaker than before, since the pawn chain is gone. So where is this king gonna go? Queen side, right? What about this pawn? Is white ever in which kind of position is white going to be able to take this? Because let's say if I castle, so first of all, you're not going to take with the bishop, and if you take with the knight, still problematic, right? Because you're inviting more pieces. So h7 pawn is weak, but not easy to take it. So now that the bishop has moved away, what can we do? Again, the position is still very dynamic. So the position is also more open. So we need to worry about this bishop becoming very strong. Because if this bishop somehow ends up on d6 or f6, this king is not going to be very happy, and then this pawn is going to be more of a problem. So even in this position, Is bishop g5 available? Maybe you should still consider playing this. So bishop going on this diagonal is already a big concession for white. So knight g6. So knight f4 is a big threat. So how to capture back? Well, one of the most interesting things about the French is once you get your bishop in the game, it's like you're playing with an extra piece, because the whole game that bishop doesn't exist, and all of a sudden the bishop's in the game, it's like an extra piece that your opponent has to deal with. So I mean, okay, I think both moves are playable. So what are the reasons behind each move?
If you take with the rook, then you still have the open g5.
What's the downside of taking with the rook? I mean, your pawn structure is still compromised. What about f takes g6? Well, so taking with the f pawn actually improves your pawn chain, no? Because you have two connected pawns. Yeah, if you can. So actually, computer really prefers f takes g6, but I took with the rook. Again, playing for the dynamics, not caring so much for the material. But f takes g6 also has its upside. So if your opponent lets you play g5, okay, just passing the move. So you're gonna restrict this bishop. After you castle, your bishop can. Oops, sorry. After you castle, this bishop can come into the game, and you're taking control of the dark squares, limiting this bishop. So here, he probably has to play something like bishop d2 and bring the bishop around again. So I think both moves are playable. So I took rook g6, so my opponent take, now castle, and so what's going on in this position? Yeah, so again, very dynamic position. So we sacrifice the pawn, so we're playing for compensation. So we have the g file. This bishop actually has a future now, because after the knight moves, maybe I can put a bishop on b5, maybe push even d4, put a bishop on c6. So this king is, not very comfortable here. So we have a lot of counterplay for the pawn. So taking on f7, let's see what she do. Yeah, so taking on f7 looks very dangerous to me. So you can play the rook h6, or even put this rook here, and this looks very uncomfortable for white. Yeah, so I can check, and I don't know, queen g4 is coming. So we are down 2 pawns, not denying that, but we have a lot of counterplay for it. And this rook h1 check is very annoying. So she played queen e2. Okay, so now we need to bring more pieces into the game. So I played knight e7, and I played it for a specific reason. So the second the knight moves, the knight's going to go to d4. So this is the battle, right, between these two knights over this d4 square. As soon as one of them moves, the other one's going to go to d4. So knight e7, knight d4, and knight f5. So I mean, this is a very significant exchange. So white has to take. Actually, white can try like rook d1 and move the queen. Okay, so this exchange happened. So what's going on now?
But he can't play bishop b5.
No, there was knight d6 check.
Oh, all right, nice.
So my opponent is she.
Oh, she.
Exactly. So when you have opposite colored bishops, we know in the end game where it drives. In the middle game, when you're attacking, they're very dangerous, because if I'm attacking on the light squares, this bishop is very useless, because you cannot protect the light squares. So what about my pawn structure?
Your pawns are on white squares.
So these pawns are compromised. But so when you're doing something like this, what are you aiming for? More general? Well, in this position, the king. So if you're gonna compromise your pawn structure, create long-term weaknesses, you're looking for like dynamic play, activity. So what I'm looking for? Imbalances. Okay. There's a specific word. Initiative. Because again, in the long term, I don't want to get stuck with pawns like this. I don't want to lose this f7 pawn. So black has two threats in this position. One of them very obvious.
Bishop B5.
Bishop b5, another one.
F4?
F4, right.
D4.
So actually white shouldn't have taken this. White should try like queen d2 or something. But then knight g3 needs to, so this position is already it's easier to play for black, the least to say, regardless of the evaluation, because you have all these threats, bishop is coming out, g3 maybe is hanging, this knight on d4 is hanging, king is much weaker. So white has something to do something about this bishop b5 move, so rook b1. So what are we doing? F4, so cannot take, so queen d3. So we take, so queen d5. Bishop c6. Yeah, we don't want to get mated, so queen f7. So all the pieces look perfect, so now it's time to do some very precise calculation, otherwise the 7th rank is... because white is threatening mate, actually it's you cannot really stop the mate. So everything you do has to be very forced. So g2 looks very counterintuitive to me. Just shutting down the file. Okay, but so g2, king g1, rook g7. The problem is you're really you're opening up your king. So at least there has going to be a perpetual. You might even lose. So we have to calculate something to check. I mean, at least I have a perpetual. Yeah, you're right. Yes. Mainly, he's going to run away in the dark squares. No, but bishop b5, of course, looks like a very natural move and needs to be calculated. Okay, so let's calculate. So queen a6, king g1, g takes f2. What happens after king f2? It's very simple. It's like 3-move checkmate. There are so many ways to checkmate. I mean, you don't even have to be so fancy. So after king g1, queen a6, queen g1, take, you even have like, so rook g2, king e3, you even have rook e2. And then king runs away, you can just check and take the queen. So we don't even have to do anything very fancy. So the main move is king h2. And there you have a forced win. So let's do candidate moves. So queen a, so far everything's forced. So queen a6, king g1, g takes f2, only tempo move, king h2. So what are your tempo moves? So rook g2 is one, there's another one. Right, so we have 2 moves we need to calculate. Like, I don't know how many ways you have made into everything wins there. Is everyone following this line? No? Okay. Vaguely. So f1 knight. So your opponent has 3 moves. Queen takes, rook takes, king h3. So what happens after rook takes? Queen e2. So we brought our queen in. So let's say rook f2. Mm-hmm. Oh, the French bishop.
Yeah.
Right, so f1 knight. So if the rook takes, so our queen is on a different diagonal, so now the queen can join the game. So queen e2. So king h3 gets mated on g4, king h1. I mean, I have so many ways to mate. So check and mate is one. Take is one. I mean, just everything. So here, if king g4, king h3, then queen g2, queen g4 mates. If queen f2, rook g2 wins. So cannot take. So what happens, let's say, if queen takes? Yeah. I don't know. I assumed. Mumbling. So rook takes, yeah, queen h6. If king here, then rook check, queen g6 mate. Or actually rook h2 mate. And then if king h3, which was played, king h4. Right, so now we have mate in 3. So she resigned, but of course it's mate. Yeah.
Queen's all the way up to there.
Queen what?
The queen's all the way over there and
Exactly. This is why we needed the queen on a6 to protect the 6th rank. So just comparing the two games. So in other position, like you need to understand what the position requires. So in this kind of position where everything is hanging, you don't really have the time for the slow maneuver. Like everything should have looked very natural, right? Developing her pieces and putting the pieces where they belong. The knight's gonna go on f3, the bishop's gonna go on d3. So everything looks very natural. But because of the nature of the position, there's so many dynamics and so many other things that are important in the position. It just didn't work out. For example, this bishop needed to be on this diagonal. It was very important for white to put black under immediate pressure, because otherwise the way she played, I really got away with what I did, right? Allowing this pawn run all the way to h6. And also very important to note that you're wasting so many moves to do this, to compromise my king side and my pawn structure, then you need to take advantage of it. Because if you spend all this time and then do nothing, then why didn't you develop earlier? Why did you spend all these moves just to come and take this pawn and then do nothing? So in this kind of position, very important for white to understand where the pieces really need to be as opposed to what looks more natural, and really improve this bishop. Because otherwise, black's position just became so nice. And it was because white wasted all these moves playing h4, h5, h6. So if you're going to waste all this time, then you need to prove why you're doing this. And then the way white played, it's like she did one thing and then she switched over, and it just didn't really go together. All right, so this is what I have for today. Thank you for joining me.